I call to order the meeting of the Verona Common Council for Monday, June 10th at 7 p.m. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Next, we'll have the roll.
Alderperson Braithwaite.
Present.
Alderperson Helmke.
Present.
Alderperson Hoagst.
Present.
Alderperson Lytle.
Here.
Alderperson Posey.
Here.
And Alderperson Tucker Long.
Here.
And then Alderpersons Harrison and Kimmett are absent and excused.
All right, 6 is a quorum, so we can proceed. We'll move on to item 4, which is public comment. Do any members of the public wish to speak? Now would be the time to do so.
Hello. For the record, I was first on the sign-up sheet, so I'll just come on up here. Hi, my name is Sean O'Brien. I work with North Point Development. I've been in the workforce housing, affordable housing area my entire career. Started with 15 years at WIDA, running the commercial lending program, and also working on Wisconsin's affordable housing policies and procedures and that sort of thing. In my time at WIDA, for about 6 years, I ran the commercial lending department where we allocated low-income housing tax credits, and then also did a lot of lending for affordable housing properties throughout the state. North Point Development did develop the Classic for those that are new on the board. That project finished last August. It's a mixed-use project on Verona Avenue. It has 63 units of workforce housing and about 6,500 square feet of commercial space, half of which is taken up by Old National Bank, and then half which is currently vacant, but we have signed a lease for half of half, so half of the remaining space, about 1,500 square feet, to an emerging woman-owned business, a dog grooming business that's going to be coming in the next couple of months. So I'm here to discuss a couple of things that we have on the agenda tonight, and so we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak on those. As you all know, there's a housing shortage in Dane County, in Verona, in the general area, state of Wisconsin country. That's some market knowledge that I'm sure everyone's well aware of. Some things that we're seeing more in the industry is market rate developers who have fully approved projects that are starting to put those up for sale because of interest rates and construction costs continue to skyrocket. So we've actually had an opportunity to take a look at a project that was approved by this group a few years ago and turned it into a possible workforce housing project. Now this project would be very similar in design to what was proposed as a market rate project, but we will be making some tweaks that you'll hear about tonight, including adding some significant energy efficiency, sustainability to the project. We do all of our projects with solar, PV solar on the roof, and this project would qualify for an Energy Star new construction certification. In addition, we're looking at reducing the density, still keep it in mixed use, and then using all of the exterior materials that was previously approved. So really trying to keep it in the same vein as what it was. When we talk about workforce, a little bit about kind of that process. Sometimes workforce housing projects can take multiple years, 3 years. The Classic took us just under 3 years from getting the site under contract to getting it complete. And so really the timing of these really make them difficult on their own, but for also trying to piece them all together with the different financing sources and whatnot. So part of that process is one, trying to find an owner that's willing to sell their property. We do have that opportunity right now at 1050 North Edge Trail, but then also coming up with a plan where the timing makes sense. And so we're looking at building 60 units of workforce housing, and to do so, which will be about a $22 million project, between the tax credit equity that we can get from WIDA to the senior debt that we can carry, the hard debt, we have approximately a $7.4 million gap in our project. We do have an opportunity through various funding sources to fill that gap. Most of those are competitive. And the timing on those are, we'll basically know if we're able to secure all those funds by the end of October. The first one is the Federal Loan Bank. We're going to ask them for $2 million. Their grant program goes up to $2 million, and that application is due on Friday. So this just kind of gives you an idea of timing and why we're bringing this here tonight. There's an affordable housing fund with the county. We're going to ask them for $2.4 million. That application is due in July, and we should know in October. And then we're going to ask for WIDA to fill $1 million gap with their vacancy to vitality, part of the big state package of affordable housing funds that were passed last year. Out of the 7.4 million, that accounts for roughly 5.3, so it leaves us with about a $2.1 million gap. And so what we're here hopefully to discuss, get your feedback on, is if there is an interest for this council to partner with North Point to provide $2.1 million of the affordable housing funds that were created through the extension of the TID to help fill our gap. Now those funds, we would be asking for them as a loan, and with the idea of paying those funds back over the course of the tax credit compliance period. You know, I understand that $2.1 million is a big number. Breaking that down a little bit, that's approximately $35,000 per unit, which isn't out of line with other communities that are investing in affordable housing right now, especially in the Dane County community. It's also a little bit less than 10% of the overall capital stack, which means that these funds will be leveraged by the community 10 to 1. So if you're looking at, well, how can we spend these funds and bring the most housing, I think a 10 to 1 leverage ratio is pretty noteworthy. This project will not be utilizing TIF. It's not in a current TIF zone. We have worked in communities where they have done TIFs for projects like this, specifically for mixed use affordable housing projects. But currently, that's not what a path we're tracking down. This project, once complete, should generate approximately $135,000 in annual real estate taxes for the city, which I think is a little over $100,000 or maybe $110,000 more than what the current vacant restaurant is paying. So there is a nice little increment there. So yeah, you know, I know that you'll be discussing both the use of the site. You know, we think that we have a good space for a multifamily project. Looking for your feedback on that, but then also looking for your feedback on if there is a level of interest in partnering with us on the project with the affordable housing funds. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still in public comment.
Hi there, everyone. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you tonight. Thanks for letting us speak. My name is Lane Manning. I live at 1103 Carter Court, so I am uniquely in this position a junior developer on this project with North Point Development and Classic and a couple others in the state. But I'm also going to talk to you as a resident because I literally live across the street from the development in question. So we've been in the Madison area 11 years. We've been in Verona 4, and I have frequented every establishment that's been in that place the last 10 years, multiple times, and I'm just kind of at the point, you know, as a neighbor across the street, you know, if the restaurant's not going to work, let's try something else. So I've been partnering with North Point and Sean since 2019 in that LIHTC space and getting to know and understand it. And so one of the tough parts is just finding a site that fits and, you know, gets neighborhood approval and city approval, staff approval, et cetera. So when this kind of fell into our lap, I was like, sweet. This was done, right? Already approved, it's down the middle, so all we're going to do is get it expired. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that. I think general consensus is that's a good use for that site. As a resident in this space as well, I would like to say that commend Verona for actually taking that step and breaking off a little piece of TID to develop a housing fund, because a lot of communities, I do a lot of the front work, finding sites, pipeline, you know, getting projects down the road to work on. A lot of communities this size don't have affordable housing funds to even think about. And since I started in 2019 to now, that space has dramatically changed. And I remember our first couple meetings was we would like to reserve the right to ask for money from the city. Now it's kind of a requirement just to get projects to meet the line, just where we are in our interest world and the financial environment that we're in. So applaud. I think it's a great use for this property, especially being across the street. And we'll have some retail in the bottom as well. So I think it's a great use. We did have one conversation with Dr. Kevin Knutson at Dental Associates, or Orthopedic Associates, sorry, and he kind of spoke for him and the dentist's office. They had no problems with the use. of that property. Matter of fact, they just want to know what happened to the market rate idea. And then can we invest? I'm like, no, not today. It's a whole different conversation. So we think we have buy-off from both neighbors and in a good position there. So in closing, I'd just like to say that I think that's a great use. I don't have an issue with the money as a resident since I'm paying part of it. And I think it's a great use. And if not us, then who would use it for? I mean, we're the only people building 3 bedrooms along with 2s and 1s in communities in our area. So thank you for your time. We're available for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. We are still in public comment, so if anyone else wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so. Not seeing anyone get up out of their seats, so we will move on to item 5, which is the approve the minutes from the May 28th, 2024 Common Council meeting. Questions, comments, or motions to approve?
Move to approve.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Humke. Last chance for corrections. Seeing no hands. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the May 28th, 2024 Common Council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. Next, we'll move on to mayor's business. We have 2 things. The first thing is that I think Alderperson Rai Kimmett has told pretty much everyone she can that she's resigning at the end of June or near the end of June. So her last meeting will be June 27th, I believe. So I'm sure she'll have something to say at her last meeting. But that moves us on to our second bullet point, which is a discussion possible action regarding how we do the appointment process for filling the vacancy for the District 2 alderperson seat. City staff has included a kind of summary of how we've done similar situations in the past, and basically we're just looking for hopefully a thumbs up to do the same thing. Although if someone wanted to do it different, I guess now would be the time to pitch your idea. So questions, comments? Alder Posey.
I will comment that I think the process has worked well in the past to bring some good candidates forward, and we've gotten some good answers to their questions and gotten to the election period.
Other thoughts from the council? So I guess, Alder Tucker Long.
What kind of action do you need on? Do you need a motion or just feedback?
I think we're looking for consensus here.
Okay.
So if everyone, I think just, Alder Hoax.
Question, is there a, not that I don't enjoy awkward voting, where we go one by one, can we do that maybe like in closed session? I just think it's kind of an odd thing to do, you know. I think that's how we did it last time, right? Where each alder was asked like who they wanted to vote for.
Gosh, I don't remember how we did it last time.
I do,
Clerk-
because it was
oh,
me.
yeah. Yeah, okay.
And, right, slightly,
Alder Humke, is
slightly
that how-
awkward.
is that how
Yeah,
it
they
works?
voted, it was like, who was voting? Yes, it was awkward. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you had to, like, say the name of the person you're voting for, and they're standing in front of you. So not that I'm fine with that, but, you know, probably a better option.
Yeah, I mean, it's really up to the council, I guess. I personally prefer it open just because, I don't know, I just prefer to have it be open. Clerk Licht.
I don't think that's something that we could go into closed session for. It doesn't fall under one of the categories in the statutes.
I look forward to that.
Other thoughts? Alder Posey.
And just something maybe to consider, maybe it's more, can we do it, well, maybe not, nomination and support versus the roll call around. So, I mean, Holly, I'm sure you're probably well aware of maybe some more of this, but I remember way back when I was appointed first time around that it was the same thing. It was, you chose and they went around, so.
I can look into different ways of doing it, although I do think it needs to be an open session.
I'm going to call myself actually first. I mean, I guess I generally as chair try to get a feel for the body, and if it seems like a couple alders want, candidate A and a couple alders want candidate B, then we kind of got to go around and just see, like what are the 2 or 3 alders who haven't spoken, what do they think, and how do we figure it out? I mean, obviously it wouldn't take much to end up with like a tie, depending on, if we had 4 candidates, each candidate gets 2 people, and then, we have to kind of figure it out. So we should probably figure out some alternate methods for breaking ties and things like that. But yeah, it's, it might just have to do it that way, where we just go around the room and, if someone gets to 4 or 5 votes, then they're probably winning, and if they don't, they don't, and we'll just keep at it till we get it. Mr. Olick.
Sorry, this is from my county clerk days. Open session, we had distributed slips of paper to the county board supervisors in that case, and they did rounds of voting, wrote the name, put it in half, and then the clerk and someone else counted the votes out of the box or whatever it was. And anyway, as soon as someone got a majority, they were appointed to the position or what have you. That's just a thought, a theory, an idea. That's the way that they did it, so.
Yeah, it's kind of like a form of instant runoff voting, where you have like your second choice and you go down the list, and so you kind of eliminate people up. Alder Humke?
Can I ask a question? Yeah, so what happens in that, like, if you're, what you're saying is there's like 4 people, and then, like, it feels like that you wouldn't actually get represented. Would you get representation if 4 people voted for, 3 people voted for them, and then one person, there's like voting for everybody else? Like, you wouldn't have a chance to narrow it down enough to make, if you were picking between person A and person B, but then person C. I don't know, there just feels like there's like a disconnect if there was a lot of people.
Yeah, instant runoff is one way that people kind of address it, where you'd have like the lowest votes would get dropped off and then
Yeah.
distributed up, and then the next lowest until someone had hit 5 votes. So if we think, I mean, fingers crossed that hopefully a lot of people apply, but if a lot of people apply, we could prepare like an instant runoff thing.
That'd be good.
Okay. Other thoughts? Alder Braithwaite.
Just want to clarify, when does the application process begin? Does it begin effective June 27th on Alder Kimmett's last day, or the following day? Like, when would applications be accepted?
Staff was planning on having this go live tomorrow, so pending your approval tonight, we would post it on our website, social media, and in the paper, depending on what the council wanted to do.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's, I just want, it's summer, there's people on vacations. Yeah, I think the longer, the better, so that's good.
Other thoughts? All right, unless there are any objections, staff will basically proceed as planned in the packet. All right, that's everything I have for mayor's business. We'll move on to item 7, announcements. Any announcements from the council? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to Alder Tucker Long.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our public works staff who has been working so much to clean up all the storm damage. So if you see them out and about, remember to tell them thank you.
Any other announcements? All right, we'll move on to item 8, administrator's report. Mr. Olick.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alder Tucker Long, you stole my thunder, so, no, all good. I just wanted to let people know, as of last Thursday, 1 full pass has been made throughout the city. And again, they will continue to make rounds in neighborhoods until the storm damage is completely cleaned up. So again, the patience of the community is appreciated. There's a lot of debris, as you know, but anyway, they're continuing to work on it. Also, we have a couple of budget deadlines here coming up for staff. This Friday, any new or additional personnel requests are due to Finance Director Brian Lamers. And then the following Monday of next week, capital requests are due to him as well. And that's where we get kind of our initial impressions from departments on what they're looking for 2025 and kind of take the budget process from there. And we did have a decent, at least, opening kind of view into our priorities here coming up with the Finance Committee just before the council meeting. And those will be ongoing throughout the summer and the fall, as they always are. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Olick? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to item 9, which is engineer's report. Ms. Fisher.
Thank you. The only thing I was going to note is that the Ardent Glen Phase 3 was just issued its erosion control permit to start mass grading today, so you'll see additional work out there. Other than that, I don't have any updates in the engineer report.
Any questions for Ms. Fisher? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to item 10, committee reports. First up, we have 10A Finance Committee. Alder Humke.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion for payment of the bills, the amount of $667,261.91.
Motion by Alder Humke, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Alder Posey. Alder Humke.
Yeah, there's $235,139 for engineering services for US 18151, $82,949 to JE Engineering for engineering services for various projects, $144,122 to MMSD for the Badger Mill Path and Ardent Glen 3 connection.
Thank you for that explanation. Any questions or comments on the motion to pay the bills? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of paying the bills in the amount specified signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Alder Humke.
Yes, I'm going to make a motion for acceptance of the 2023 financial statements, pending a presentation by Baker Tilly.
Motion by Alder Humke, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Alder Posey. Alder Humke.
Yeah, Baker Tilly staff are attending our council meeting tonight to provide a presentation on the 2023 financial statements and audit.
Take it away.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. My name is John Rader. I'm probably a familiar face to some of you, perhaps not all of you, but I've been associated with the city's audit for a number of years. I'm going to spend most of my time going through these financial highlights, which I think are a part of your packet. These are what we've used in the past. We find it's a lot easier for everybody involved, including myself, compared to flipping through a whole bunch of pages in the financial statements. But before I touch on those, I just want to mention a couple administrative items. We issued our final opinion on May 30th, which is a pretty quick turnaround from the time they actually did the audit this last spring. And that's because of the great work that Brian does and everybody else that gets involved with the audit. We asked for a lot of different things for my team, which audits all the governmental funds, and the utility teams as well. And Brian has not only puts them together in great quality, but also actually is ready before we even are. So Brian's great to work with, and that allows for an efficient audit and for us to be sitting here tonight kind of early in our presentation season, if you would. The other thing I want to mention is we issued what we call an unmodified opinion. So it's a clean opinion on your financial statements, which equates to them being prepared according to generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, which means all the numbers in there are materially correct as we measure materiality. All the financial statement disclosures and such are in there as well. So there's just over 100 accounting rules these days we have to abide by, and when I started this, there were 16. So there's been a lot, and there's a lot of things that some don't apply to the city, but most of them do. So it's a big effort, and definitely appreciate everything that goes into it. The two deliverables, one of the financials that you already mentioned. The other document is this reporting and insight. There's a whole host of things in here. I'm not going to walk you through it, but it talks about what are our responsibilities as your auditors. Sometimes there's some confusion on that, but we're GAAP auditors, like I was just talking about. What are the upcoming GASBs? You know, there's these 100 rules. There was a few more that have been recently issued that could impact the financial statements of the city going forward. There's some required communications in there, which you're going to see in all audit reports from all CPA firms, no matter if it's government or manufacturing company or whatever. Those are things like, were there disagreements during the course of the audit? Was there a need to consult another firm or CPA firm or somebody else to try to settle something? Was there fraud encountered? A lot of those kind of things. I can tell you that there's nothing of that nature in this report for Verona. But the thing that probably draws the most attention are the internal control points. And we just have one comment in here. It's the one that we have in 90-some% of our reports. And it's the fact that we prepare your financial statements. We prepare financials for, like I said, the majority of the governments, just because our resources aren't available internally to prepare those. Unfortunately, the auditing standards that we have to go by kind of hold governments to that same level as like an SEC company. And so in most situations, you know, that gets kind of outsourced to the CPA firms, and we prepare the financials because we do so many each year. Even if you did your own, if we had material entries, that comment will probably still be there because the controls, so to speak, were not in place to prevent that kind of material misstatement. So we do prepare your statements. However, we did not have any entries for the city, and this is 2 or 3 years running. That is very unusual. And again, that goes back to Brian and everybody else involved. It's important for the audit, but it's even more important as you head into budget season, like you were just talking about. And the department heads be able to rely on that financial information as they look at it throughout the year. If I come in here and said you have 50, 55 entries, you might start to question what you're looking at throughout the year. But again, we didn't have any, nor did the utilities. So hats off to everyone here involved. All right, with that, I'm going to go through the highlights. And if you flip to the first page, I think you all have it as part of your packet. Okay, I'm seeing heads nod. Page 1 is taking a look at your general fund balance. And in fund balance reporting, you can have up to 5 different components, and the City of Verona has 3. So I'm going to start at the bottom, actually. You can see the light blue represents 2023, and the black is 2022. Not much in non-spendable, 172,000. These are really gap-driven items. It's prepaid, so things that you've already paid for, so it kind of ties up fund balance, so to speak, and so it's not available to apply anywhere else. So GAP says you have to set those aside in this category. Then jumping up to assigned, really close to last year, 971,000. This is the amount that you've applied to balance the 2024 budget. Okay, so management decision. Everything else ends up in unassigned. So you can see it went from 4.1 up to 6.1, almost $2 million increase. Very high level summarized income statement down below in the middle of that page. You can see how you got there. So revenues came in at 11.4, about 1.4 over budget. And expenditures came in at 9.4 or 1.7 under budget. A lot of the details of what makes up those variances are in the back of the financial statements on pages 55 to 57. But just from my quick look at it when I was preparing for this, building and associated permits are over budget, as well as investment income, which we have seen everywhere we've been this year. Especially fixed income securities took a big hit in 2021, 2022. They've rebounded and regained that during 2023. And you do have a nice sized portfolio. So that was a big part of the revenue overage. On expenditures, again, back in the detail, you'll see most departments are actually under budget. The one that stood out to me a little bit is police by $638,000, okay, under. What does that mean if you go to the next page, on page 2? And you compare that to your policy. Your policy is graphed out there. It's to try and maintain 20 to 35% of, in this case, the 2024 budgeted expenditures within your general fund. And so you can see the range. It's kind of hard to see that light blue line of the policy, but the black line is the upper amount. And you can see the red graphed out amount. You're up to 54%. Of your 2024 budget expenditures at the end of this year. So you've been above for the last 5 years. For curiosity's sake, and that's really all the value it has, you can see other places that we audit are those blue dots, and that's based on population, okay, for our firm. All right, page 3. And page 4, we're taking a look at the debt. 3 is how much debt is outstanding at the end of the year, and we look at it statutorily, and that's the way it's graphed out here. It is pointed out at the top here that the city has a debt management policy, which I don't see. We see probably 25% of the time, so I think it's great that you do. It's more restrictive than the state statutes, obviously. But you could see how you sit compared to state statutes. And that black line is your equalized value, up to 199 million. It's up about 9.8% from the prior year, so some nice growth the last couple of years. And the red line represents your GO debt, and that went down about $2 million during the year. And so you're utilizing about 18% of your debt capacity. Last year, that was 21%, and 2 years ago, that was 28%. So it's been inching downwards as the debt's been getting slowly paid down and your value's been going up. Now, the breakdown of what makes up that $36 million in outstanding GO debt is down in that table 2/3 of the way down. Most of that's with city, including TIFs, obviously. But about 7.6 is also held in the utility funds. Years ago, the city had revenue bonds outstanding, which were backed by user charges, but it's been cheaper to issue GO debt, so that's what's been issued since. So the revenue debt has been paid off. If you were to back out the amount of utility GO debt and look at that debt limit, you would be at 14%. Okay, but it still, by statute, gets included in that calculation. Page 4 shows you how much you pay in debt service during the year for your governmental funds compared to all your non-capital expenditures. And that's kind of a hard thing to get your head around, but if you think of how much are we paying in principal and interest for all our debt in the governmental funds, well, you're paying about 23.9%, okay? We generally recommend around 20%. It's been inching its way downward. That's because of the TIF debt going down over the last several years. It's obviously manageable. You work with your bond advisor and such. And again, those black dots represent other places that we audit of similar size and population. Any questions on the governmental funds? The last three are utility-based.
Any questions from the council?
Yep.
Alder Ladle.
Thank you. So understanding the transition to using general obligation for a bond source as opposed to revenue bonds for utility expenditures, is that a fairly recent development? I mean, I'm familiar with, state revolving fund grant program or loan programs and that kind of thing that typically drive the cost of borrowing down for revenue bonds. So just curious about whether we're out of the ordinary there or whether that's a trend you've seen.
I don't think you're out of the ordinary. I actually have seen more of that. I can't give you a specific year of the transition, maybe Brian recalls, but it seems like I see less revenue debt being issued because of how cheap it has been to issue GO debt. Plus, with your capacity, that hasn't been an issue either. Now, I'm guessing years ago when TIF 7 was going, there was a lot of debt. The amount that was being utilized by the city was a much higher percentage. So maybe that's when the revenue bonds kicked in. And there was actually some lease revenue bonds too with the CDA, which are outside of the debt limit. But the reality is that increment coming from TIF 7 was still used to pay it. But as we all know now, that's a very robust TIF when it was open. So there was a lot of debt that needed to be issued, which probably drove the utilities to have to issue that revenue debt. But those days are past us.
Other questions from the council?
I do have a few more slides. I'll hit on the utility funds.
Yeah.
And the first one is talking about the water utility fund and a couple different metrics to look at the financial health of this fund. This is the one fund that's regulated by the PSC, as we know, and the city has an authorized rate of return of 5.3% for the last couple of years. I always think of that as a target rate, and you were at 4.3% this year, which is up from the previous year of 1.18. You can see it mapped out in the middle, where your revenues are that blue line, and the expenditures are the black line. So positive margin, operating margin for all 5 of those years presented. Revenues were up a little bit due to higher consumption in 2023, probably from the drier summer that we had. And operating expenses decreased due to a large well rehab project that occurred in 2022. That's why there's that blip going up in 2022 that did not repeat this year. That's what drove the expenses going down slightly is what drove that rate of return to bump up this year. In the middle, or about 2/3 of the way down, you can see the unrestricted reserves, pretty consistent with the previous year. Generally recommend 3 months of operating, for operations, I should say, plus another year or 12 months for unanticipated capital needs. So that would put you about 15, what we would generally recommend, and you're sitting at 23. So the water utility fund's in good shape and has been for a number of years. At the very bottom, you can see that bar graph where it says equity 97%. Again, this is a calculated amount that says how much of your plant, because this is a very capital-intensive fund, as are all the utilities, how much has been derived through earnings versus outstanding debt, and you're at 97% through earnings. We generally recommend 50% or more, so 97% is outstanding. That's fairly common to be over 50% in a community that has a policy of relying somewhat upon developer contributions, which Verona does. Next page is sewer. Similar analysis without the PSC, though. Both the revenues and expenses are almost like a mirror image of each other for the last 5 years. Revenues did go up $181,000 this last year, though, about 7%. That's because of the new rates being applied from Q1 2023, which they have also gone up, I should say, in Q1 of 2024. So they, for the first time, have exceeded the expenses. Unrestricted reserves are at about 13 months. Again, pretty strong, consistent from year to year, and your equity to debt ratio is at 81%, so no concerns there. And then lastly, the stormwater fund. Quite often we'll see a lot more volatility in the stormwater fund in the years of capital. Expenses are such if you don't issue debt. But you can see how it's laid out again for the last 5 years. In this case, the expenses are actually over the revenues for each of the 5 years. Expenses went up $63,000 or 7%. Revenues did go up this last year, though. You can see they went up 24%. That's due to a full year of the new billing rates being implemented, as well as new units being added to driving that growth. And then the unrestricted reserves, you went from 7 up to 13, again, due to those new rates, but also a $500,000 DNR grant came into this fund that there was a receivable for at the end of the 2022, but the cash finally came in 2023, so that was a big part of that increase. And 96% of the plant come in from equity or earnings. So no real financial concerns over your funds. I mean, like I said, I've been involved with this audit a lot of years, and there's always good fiscal management, lots of growth and such. So have to answer any questions you may have, though.
Any questions? Alder Tucker Long.
Do you recommend 15 months on hand for stormwater and sewer as well?
Depends what your philosophy is. Some places, actually, because stormwaters haven't been around a whole lot for most municipalities, it's more of a recent initiative, and so some have avoided issuing debt, and so it, like I said, big moments of volatility, but you do have a little bit of debt there, so it depends how you manage that. If you anticipate trying to use cash, then I would build it up, but if not, then it's not so much of a concern.
Other questions? Alder Lytle.
Going back to pages 1 and 2, where we look at the fund balances and how we've seen those trend up, particularly from 2019 through 22, and then we look at 23 being a 54% fund balance. I'm assuming when trying to respond to questions from citizens, we would not want to see that number continue to increase year over year, because it's basically implying that we're collecting money from them that we're not spending, and instead of them making interest on it, we're making interest on it, those kind of things. And I know that longer-term budget planning, I think that situation isn't likely to continue, but any feedback from that on, compared to your medians and other things, what you kind of recommend?
Well, as you would guess, my first reaction is it's a management decision. But the great thing is, though, you have a policy. And so that policy talks about trying to maintain between those two bars, basically, and anything over is to be applied towards one-time expenditures or capital items, which is what I would suggest, too, because if you rely upon it for continuing operations, it's going to be hard to build back. However, if it's used for capital, which I see more and more places develop a policy or revise their policy to go towards that, or some other one-time fiscal needs, but capital is by far the most common one. That's a good way to approach it. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of governments have been doing a little bit better the last couple of years because of ARPA funds and such coming in, but who knows what the future is going to bring, and those ARPA funds have to be spent down over the next year. Yeah.
Other questions from the council? Seeing no further questions, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We did have a motion to accept the report. Any other discussion on the motion to accept the report? Alder Posey.
I'll just add, since it wasn't a question, I didn't want to say it earlier, but it is wonderful. Annually now, I think we hear what a great job Brian and his team do for our city and supporting our fiscal responsibilities to the whole community. So thank you very much for doing a really great job, and please pass that on to the rest of the team.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the 2023 financial statements presented by Baker Tilly signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further from finance?
Nothing further.
Excellent. With that, we'll move on to 10B, which is Planning Commission. Alder Posey.
Thank you. Give me just 1 second. So I'd like to bring for discussion and possible action the initial review for a mixed-use building with approximately 60 apartment units and 2,224 square feet of commercial space located at 1050 North Edge Trail. I don't We don't need a second or anything, do we?
No, no second,
I was
just-
going to say, I'll just keep going. The Plan Commission met on June 3rd, 2024, to discuss the initial review for a mixed-use building located at 1050 North Edge Trail. A planned development was approved in March of 2022, which has since expired, for a 4-story building containing 64 apartment units and 5,096 square feet of commercial space. Staff recommended the Plan Commission review the submitted materials for 60 apartment units and 2,224 square feet of commercial space, and provide feedback to the applicant to ensure the following questions are answered. Will a mixed-use building be supported on this property? Is there enough commercial space for a mixed-use building? And will 4 stories be supported? Comments from the Plan Commission include overall support from the amount of proposed commercial space, the height of the building, and support for keeping the overall previously approved building design. There should be a pedestrian connection to the commercial development to the east of the property. Additional comments included covering the bicycle rack and making a safe area for children to play, especially with the 2- and 3-bedroom apartment units. Otherwise, there was a discussion on whether there is enough or too much commercial space proposed for the project, and the applicant stated it is a good amount of commercial space for one tenant. Otherwise, the property would need to be rezoned to have more apartment units. The applicant also noted that there is good visibility for commercial development. The Common Council is encouraged to provide feedback and recommendations to the applicant, as this is the initial review of the development.
Thank you for that explanation. 2 quick notes. One, Mr. Zubertson is joining us via Zoom, so if someone does have a question for city staff, feel free to ask. And 2, if you're wondering about the financial loan part, that is the next item, and we'll talk about it under that one. This is just the land use. So feedback from the council. Alder Humke.
Yeah, okay, so I liked the previous, I was in favor of the previous building that was coming in, so I'm just curious, with the comments that the Plan Commission made, I was maybe a little confused because I thought it was the same, pretty much, in terms of the commercial space on the bottom, which I think is great. I like I think the layout is just, it's fantastic use of that property, I think. So any feedback on that from the Plan Commission? Like, what was the comments coming from?
So the commercial space, the old plan had pretty much that entire base, and this may even be one that the developer can answer and speak to, the change that was made, because it was taken down to a much smaller section as opposed to having restaurant space and everything else. It's just a portion.
Okay, yeah, that'd be helpful, could you?
Yeah.
If the applicant would like to
you.
address that.
Hello. So the original plan, let me take a step back. Our intention is to use as much of the, the previous developers' civil and architectural plans. It, helps us with our, financial model to be able to reuse that. Originally, the site did call for 64 units and about 4,500 square feet of commercial space. So if you're looking at the site plan, on the north, would be the northwest side of the building, it was kind of an L as it took up that corner. We reduced it to just the front side of the building. So we took it down about 2,000 square feet. Originally, it was intended to be like one big restaurant with a pickup window. And so we took out the pickup window and added some more parking as well.
Okay, so is the space not intended to have like a restaurant? Is it more to be like a storefront versus a restaurant, or it could be either? I'm just going more out of curiosity.
Yeah, so the end user isn't determined at this
Okay.
point. It all kind of depends on, what the level of interest is for the site. I think a 4,500 square foot restaurant at that site with 64 units would have been tough to park at. So we may not look at someone who's, in need of such, heavy parking, I guess, that needs that much parking, but we're kind of keeping that open. It's kind of, we view a commercial as, and we did this as well for Classic, as, we're trying to build the workforce housing. When we go into our lenders and our investors for that buy the tax credits, they're going to make us underwrite that being vacant space. And so it kind of hurts with the amount of funds we can borrow, but it helps with who we can provide, opportunities to work with. We're not is you'll see at Classic, we're looking at, someone who doesn't have a big balance sheet, getting, front, storefront retail space to move in there.
Thank you, appreciate that. Can I just add another? Okay,
absolutely.
so my other comments, I really like the fact that there's space for families to live here. We're in very close proximity to multiple schools. I just think it's great that there's walkability, to just downtown, to the schools, to everything. So from this standpoint, I'm very much in favor of this plan.
Other feedback from the council? Alder Tucker Long.
Since the applicant's still up here, what's going into that space if you're not using it for retail? Is it more units or?
The space, the 2,200 square feet.
Yeah.
So right now, under the current zoning, we have to have some sort of mixed-use component. So you'll see on the site plan that the side of the first floor that faces the highway is no residential units. We have our office and our workout room, our community room, et cetera. And I believe if we were to eliminate that commercial space, we'd have to do a rezone, and that process is a little bit more lengthy. It could be, a bit more difficult. Again, kind of going back to the timing of applying for these different various funds, it could be difficult to go through a rezone process versus, the PD with a mixed-use building.
You're saying if you eliminate all the commercial, you'd have to go to a rezone, or you're saying if you don't eliminate the half of the retail?
I think that's a good question for Plan Commission in terms of how much retail is needed. I think also that's a good question for staff in the planning department. My understanding was that having a non-residential use along the front met zoning definition for mixed use under the new zoning code. But, I can't give much more detail. That's not my area of expertise, sorry.
Could we get Lucas to respond to that? Because it was my understanding that the zoning required the entire first floor for mixed use.
If we could get Mr. Sievertson promoted to presenter so we can talk, or I guess he can talk right now.
Yeah, so it is in a commercial zoning district, and so in order to allow residential, it would have to be a mixed-use project. The previous building had roughly 5,000 square feet of commercial on the first floor. The rest was residential or components for residential projects, like associated common area space. So this is just reducing that amount from 5,000 to 2,200 square feet. So it's not as though there would be residential units fronting on Main Street. It's just that there would be less commercial, and some of that would be occupied as lobby space and common space.
Did that any follow-ups, I guess, Alder Tucker?
So you're saying that the zoning does not require the first floor to be all commercial? I'm just asking because in previous discussions, I thought we had, that you had said the whole first floor had to be commercial.
Yeah, because it's a planned development, that's something that would be an allowable exception.
Okay. Sorry, you have more?
Just to say, I am in support of a building like this being at this site. I have no issues with the 4 feet. I'm trying to remember what the other questions were. Anyways, I like it. I would like to see covered bike storage and play spaces for kids, especially given the proximity to 2 pretty busy higher speed roads. It'd be nice to have some, like an enclosed play area or something. Right.
Alder Hoax.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. Yeah, I'm I think I'm a big fan. I mean, it kind of went away. We talked about it like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and just nothing ever happened. So it's good to see it back. I know when we talked about the 4-story question a couple of years ago, I think since that is so much lower grade than that road, I really don't think it'll be an issue for any of those homes across the street. So I'm in favor, and I think it's smart to actually reduce that commercial. It's getting a little better, but I know there's a lot of commercial that's sitting vacant, and the last thing we need is to force somebody to put in vacant space and let it just sit there. So, yeah, I think It's a good plan that's back. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel on the design since we liked it the first time, so thank you.
Other thoughts from the council? Or at least as far as land use goes. Alder Tucker Long.
I guess I'm so on the commercial being removed. Like, I definitely don't want to make the project harder for you to complete. But as a small business owner, I know it's really hard to find affordable space. And so I would really like to see, just in general, more smaller units for places to go into that could be affordable for people who are starting out, things like that. And yeah, commercial hasn't been great over the last, 5 years or so, but that doesn't necessarily mean it won't be better in the future. And once it's not commercial space, it's hard to make it into an existing building. So just something to consider.
Any other feedback from the council? Alder Humke.
One other thing I just did want to go on record saying was, the first time this project came, I asked about solar panels on the roof. And so I'm really, really excited and grateful for you including that as part of this project. I think it's really important to set a precedent that this, although it's not required, right, that we want to have a community that encourages sustainability. And so I really am happy to see that that's part of this.
I guess I'll call it myself. I just want to, agree with Alder Humke that I think the solar panels are an excellent addition. And I guess I'll say, generally I'm in favor of this because I was in favor of the previous one and it's pretty similar. And I'll just repeat my comment that I think that a walking connection so people can walk from here to the commercial to the east of there, I think is really important. It's, because there is commercial in the neighborhood. And so if it's reduced at this location, it might be nice if people can walk to somewhere else. Last chance for feedbacks, at least at this moment, on land use. All right. Mr. Sievertson, was there any unaddressed questions that we had?
Nope, that was it.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. All right. We'll finish this one and proceed to the next one. Alder Posey, did you want to cover this one or? Okay.
Discussion and possible action, consideration of the request by North Point Development Corporation to receive a loan from the City Affordable Housing Funds. The applicant of the above mixed-use development proposed at 1050 North Edge Trail is requesting the city consider providing assistance in the amount of $2.1 million to help fund the 60 affordable housing units in the development. The $2.1 million in financing would come from the city's Affordable Housing Fund, created by the one-year extension of TID 4 and TID 6. The resolutions extending the TIDs stated that at least 75% of the funds must be used for affordable housing, with the remaining portion used to improve housing stock. The request equates to $35,000 per unit, which is within the range of subsidies provided by other Dane County municipalities on a per-unit basis. The current Affordable Housing Fund balance is $2,849,054.49.
And then I guess before we just get into feedback, I have a question for the applicant. So I see the total amount, and I was looking for the packet. What would be the length of the loan and the interest rate you'd be looking to pay back for?
So that's up for negotiation. What the county has done is they've established, and different municipalities will do it differently. The idea is this is patient capital or patient debt that gets paid back after the tax credit investor leaves the project at the end of the compliance period, which is 15 years. So some municipalities like the city of Madison, they split their affordable housing funds into two loans. One is a 30-year loan at 0%. The other one is a 17-year loan at 2.75%. The county does a 2% interest-only loan for 30 to 45 years, depending on how long the project is planning to or committing to remain affordable. Kind of sticks that maturity date out through there. I think ideally what we'd be looking for is something along the lines of a 17-year term that we can then pay back those funds once we recapitalize the project after the tax credit investor has gotten out of the project.
Thank you. That's clarifying, at least for me. Feedback from the council. Alder
I would
Humke.
like clarification. So 17 years at what percentage?
Well, ideally, having it be somewhere, similar to other gap financing funds. So, typically we'd see something in the 2 to 3% range. WIDA does 3% on their sub-debt, except for in rural communities, they do 1. Again, but the county does 2%. Madison is a split between 0 and 2.75.
Any follow-up, Alder Humke?
Not to that, no.
Okay. Feedback from the council or thoughts? Alder Posey.
I'll say at this point, I'm in support of it. I would hope that, we make sure that, I guess things don't get nickeled and dimed. One of the things that just popped in my head as I was just scrolling through to get to my spot was underground parking. We're not going to charge additional for those parking spaces that we're requiring, because I've heard of that happening in our city. And especially being that these are affordable housing units and we're giving funds towards that, I would think that that would not be something we'd be charging additional for in people's rent. So I think that overall I'm in support of it. I'm like the idea of it being a loan and not some sort of a grant, because we know that then we'll have funds down the road to be able to use again for future developments as we continue to grow.
Other thoughts from the council? Alder Host.
Question on the, so 17 years, you're paying back over 17, or we're starting at, once we get to that 17, once your investor's out?
So what happens is on these cash flow loans is it basically sits patiently, and there's not enough cash flow as we're restricting our rents, have operating expenses. We're probably at, like, let's say a 1.2 to 1.3 debt coverage ratio, meaning that we have $1.30 in income for every dollar of debt that we have on the project. So in these types of developments, there's just not a large stream of cash flow. But as we go through the 15 years, we're paying down our senior loan. So then when we're able to recapitalize the project, and not recapitalizing the project in terms of a sale, but instead recapitalizing to get our tax credit investor out, so then we own the project 100%. We'd have the opportunity to pay what I would assume at that point in time would be the principal and accrued interest. So it's unlikely, at least for the first 10 to 12 years, if things go very well, that any of the interest would get paid back. So it'd be accrued and then a big balloon payment at the end of the 17-year term.
Thank you.
Alder Humke, I believe.
Yeah, okay, so I have a couple of questions. So how would we, you mentioned about, and other agreements you have, that the affordability of the property is maintained. How do we get ensure that that's going to happen? I guess I'm very new to this, so I wasn't on when any of these other developments were happening.
So on projects like these, we're going to end up having probably 5 land use restriction agreements, one for the tax credits, one for the tax exempt bonds that are going to be on there, and one for the county funds, and we could put one on to the project for the city funds as well. But all of those land use restriction agreements kind of fall back to what's the most restrictive. And so if, the tax credit program requires a 30-year affordability requirement, that's great. That one gets released. We still have the county that's out there for, 35 or 40 years. And so the other lenders, are kind of guaranteeing that project has to maintain that level of affordability. And in tax credit projects, WIDA does the compliance piece of it. So they're coming out and looking at all of the, looking at a portion of the apartments, taking a look at the files to make sure that the tenants that live there qualify for the units, as well as the tax credit investor. Because if for some reason we were to go over income and rent to someone who didn't qualify, you'd end up losing all of the tax credits for the period of time, that unit was occupied. And I would just add, as we are going for these other funds, the county and, AHP, if we don't get them, obviously the project can't move forward. So what's nice about this site is we have, 3 or 4 months, but, then we'll know what's happening. And so I think, looking to see what the feedback is, like, okay, well, if we're able to assemble this other capital stack of soft funds, does that, interest the city and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Okay, one other question I have. So how does this property, how is it the same and/or different from the classic project? Is it North Point? Is that the technical name? How is, in terms of how the management of the rentals goes? Like, I guess, is there a difference between the types of, like the income levels of the people that would live there?
So the Classic has 20% of the units at 30% county median income, 40% of the units at 50% or less of county median income, and 40% at 80% of county median income. And this would be the exact same.
Okay, so are you going to be using the same project, the same, like, this, like, rental, like, management company? Do you use management company, correct, to, like, determine who's going to come? Are you going to use the same management company that you're currently using?
That would be the intention. You know, in workforce housing, there's very few management companies that are in the industry. If there's, you know, any feedback that you'd like to get us either offline or online, certainly would be open to hearing that. You know, one of the things, you know, that comes along with, you know, Lane and I being, you know, local in the community is that if, you know, if we hear of things going on, we can certainly respond to it. But management as a whole is a challenge, you know, getting someone who's going to stick with the property. You know, with the Classic, we are on our second manager, but that manager has been in place now for about 8 months time. So, you know, the industry is tough to find someone who's going to, you know, stick with the project, but we do have, you know, on-site management that's there on a weekly basis, you know, there Monday through Friday.
Okay. I'm not super comfortable talking about it, like, publicly about my feelings about it, but I could talk offline. I guess I'm in general, my overall statement would be I'm in favor of this project being funded via this fund. I appreciate Alder Hoke's clarifications because I didn't totally understand that funding, how that worked. I do have some concerns over the management of it. So I guess I'll want to take that offline.
Other feedback from the council? Alder Lytle.
So I know there's a lot of things coming together here in the near term. From your perspective, knowing about these other competitive grant programs, loan programs, the coming into that application process, stating that you have positive feedback for local matching or local contributions versus, oh, you can get money from other sources. Why should we fund this project when the local community is willing to provide some of their own loans? How does that work in terms of the benefits for those specifically getting some kind of formal or informal feedback from us?
Yeah, I would say through the Federal Home Loan Bank application, the more committed funds that you have. So when we apply, we'll show our capital stack of, you know, senior debt and tax credit equity that will have, you know, commitments for, and then, you know, the county funds and possibly the city funds and everything else. And so the more committed funds that you have, that's better. But that piece of it is more threshold on, you know, do you have, you know, what they view as enough for them to make their commitment. And their award is up to $2 million if you can show that there's a gap for that to fill. So, you know, in terms of having like a hard or soft commitment at this point for that application doing Friday, I don't think it matters too much. For the county funds, they definitely view support from the municipality as a positive and makes them, I think, a little bit more interested and improves your score for them to invest their funds into the project. But in terms of, yeah, everyone kind of understands that someone has to be first in. And typically, as Lane had mentioned, you know, we like to come to communities typically to say, here's what we have left. And, you know, can you help us with what we have left? And this is a little bit different from that structure. But I can say that, you know, the county funds definitely view it positively if there's a commitment of the municipality and you know, putting funds towards the project.
I think when I said my comments earlier, it was communities this size, not a lot of communities this size that I approach have a fund. That's a struggle at first because it's another 3-4 months to figure out how to cover that gap. That's why this was not only attractive because it was already teed up in place from a planning and impediment standpoint, but there's some money there to help. 'Cause, like I said, it's changed over the years. And I'm not lying to you. It was an option full 5 years ago. It's a requirement now. We have to get some help just to make the ends meet, so.
Other feedback from the council? Alder Tucker Long.
I am super in favor of workforce housing, as anyone who's heard me talk at this council before knows. I am a little concerned about the size of this loan and the fact that potentially we're not getting it back for 17 years, that it's just about all of our fund. So it kind of means we can't do any other projects for 17 years. So that's giving me just a little bit of pause, and just kind of want to, I guess, think about if this is really enough of a project for 17 years. And then talk about what our risk is with this loan and things like that as well.
Other feedback from the council? Alder Posey, then myself.
Not so much that, but maybe a question for Mr. Lamers to bring forward is, do we have any other TIFs closing that we might be, or Mr. Alec, if you know that answer, that we might be able to do the same strategy on and continue this new tradition of ours to leave that open for a year?
I swear I'm psychic sometimes. I knew that was going to be asked. I was looking at the Joint Review Board materials that's coming up at the end of this month, and TID 8, now these are current cash flow. All the liabilities are accounted for, the projected revenues pan out, et cetera, on what is at this time. So if we do another project, that can mess with the numbers. But TID 8 is 2032, TID 9 is 2036, and TID 10 is projected to close in 2031. So it's not quite, if the council or decision makers at that time choose to extend the TID another year towards this fund, that's their decision to make, I guess.
Any follow-ups? Alder Posey?
No, thank you.
All right, calling on myself. Yeah, I think I share some of the concerns that Alder Tucker Long has, just that it's going to tie up all the funds into one project. I will say, after having done some research, it is kind of, I guess it's really dismaying how expensive it is to build housing, because as the applicant said, this is pretty standard on a per unit basis, which I find just incredible. I know part of getting old is just complaining about how things are way more expensive than when you were a kid, and I guess that's me, but I just, to me, it's very much in line with what kind of, I guess what you'd say the market or what affordable units costs, but to me, I just find it just generally as a broad systematic thing incredibly frustrating. So, it's kind of like, well, if it wasn't this project, what else could we do? And I don't really have a good answer for that. So I do share a lot of concerns about tying it all up, but I don't have an alternative, which is frustrating to me, and I'm starting to wonder if there is one. So those are my thoughts. Other feedback from the council? All right. Seeing no further discussion, anything further from Planning Commission?
Nothing further.
Excellent. With that, we'll move on to 10C, which is Public Safety and Welfare. Alder Host.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve a sidewalk cafe permit application and amended premises description for Toot and Kate's LLC, doing business as Toot and Kate's Wine Bar, located at 109 South Main Street.
Motion by Alder Host. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Tucker Long. Alder Host.
Thank you. Toot and Kate submitted an application for a sidewalk cafe permit. Their proposal conforms to the requirements in the adopted ordinance. The sidewalk cafe setback is 1 foot from the back of the curb. The proposed iron fence is freestanding and comes in 5 sections for easy removal. The proposal also includes 4 to 5 drum tables with 8 to 10 chairs. The fire hydrant located near the property is 18 feet from fencing, and city light poles will be outside of the enclosure. Staff recommend approval of the sidewalk cafe permit and amending their liquor license premises description to include the sidewalk cafe. And I do believe that we have all received a emailed picture of the fence, which looks real nice, whether or not it's painted. I kind of like the metal look. But We did not cover this in public safety and welfare because we do not have a quorum, so we do not have a meeting. The chief gave his sign off on this. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting a nod. That's all I have.
All right, motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Alder Posey, and then Alder Tucker Long.
And this may require the chief to weigh in, but were there any concerns with that fence? Because this was a kind of a question of mine even when we reviewed this last time, just with that driveway that's right there with sightlines for that driveway and people walking and, you know, is it going to impact if someone's coming in, making a right-hand turn or pulling out? Is that height going to affect a driver's sightline?
Yeah, I don't believe so. The driveway to the south, as roadblocks there and isn't used, and it's far enough from the driveway to the north where I don't anticipate a problem.
Thank you. That's all my only question.
Alder Tucker Long.
I just wanted to say that I think the fence looks great. I'm really excited that we have our first applicant for our new ordinance, and thank you for everyone's patience while we put an ordinance in.
Other thoughts on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of granting the Sidewalk Cafe permit application and amended premises description for Tootin' Kate's LLC doing business as Tootin' Kate's Wine Bar located at 109 South Main Street, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further from public safety?
Nothing further, thank you.
Excellent. With that, we move on to item 11, which is new business. First up, we have 11A, a discussion and possible action regarding resolution number R-24-016, establishing in-person absentee voting locations for the 2024 partisan primary and the 2024 general election. Clerk Licht.
So this resolution is just required for the council to pass to establish in-person absentee voting locations for the upcoming 2 elections. It will designate City Hall and the library as early voting locations for City of Verona voters.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, or motions on this item? Alder Tucker Long.
I just had a quick question because we added a new voting location. And I'm wondering, do we normally have in-person absentee voting at all the locations where we have voting, or is it a staffing issue?
So the election day polling places that we currently only have agreements to be in those spaces on election day. We've traditionally just used City Hall and the library because there's city buildings, and we have, you know, the storage and the security in place for that. And there was, we have no plans to go to those other spaces.
Thank you. In that case, I would like to move that we approve resolution number R-24-016, establishing in-person absentee voting locations for the 2024 partisan primary and the 2024 general election.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Lytle, I think. He had his hand up first. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving resolution number R-24-016, establishing in-person absentee voting locations for the 2024 partisan primary and the 2024 general election, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. I will move on to 11B, which is a discussion and possible action regarding the easement for underground electric and communication. Mr. Olick.
Thank you, Mayor. Enclosed are easement documents from Alliant Energy for the purpose of running power through Century School Park to feed 401 West Verona Avenue, AKA the Art House. Interim Director of Public Works, Adam Wasak, worked with Alliant on the proposed route and has no issues with it. Staff recommend approval of the easement, and he assured me as Parks Director, no trees would be harmed in the running of the power. So it's going from the park shelter to the back of the school, the former school.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, or motions on this item? Alder Posey.
I'll first say thank you very much for specifying that all of our wonderful older growth trees that are in our park remain safe during this transition process. So,
Other questions, comments, or motions? Alder Posey.
Like to make a motion to approve the easement for underground electric and communication to feed 401 West Verona Avenue, known as the Art House.
Motion by Alder Posey. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Humke. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the easement for the underground electric and communication, the location specified in the packet, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion passes. We move on to item 12, adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alder Hoax. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Tucker Long. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. And we adjourned at 8:15 p.m. Thank you, everyone.